Ethan Walker's apartment was quiet, painted in pale grey, almost bare, where every footstep echoed against the emptiness. On the bookshelf in the corner sat a silver photo frame, dust clinging to its edges. Inside was a picture of 3 young faces, Isathan, Daniel, and Claire. Daniel stood in the middle, his arm around his best friend and his wife, smiling brightly with the kind of joy that felt endless. Ethan had stopped in front of that photo countless times, staring at it with a heart full of warmth and ache. Daniel was gone now. A sudden traffic accident had stolen him away, leaving behind a silence no one could fill. In his final moments at the hospital, Daniel had gripped Ethan's hand and whispered, "Take care of Claire and Lily. Don't let them be alone." Those words had become Ethan's promise, a weight he carried every single day for the past 2 years. On a crisp Saturday morning, Ethan locked his door and drove down the familiar road to Claire's house in Willow Creek. The maple trees lining the streets were dressed in golden leaves, and the quiet town was so familiar he could have driven with his eyes closed. At the end of a peaceful lane stood Claire's home, a white wooden cottage with soft green trim. As Ethan pulled up to the gate, laughter burst through the morning air. "Uncle Ethan," Lily's voice rang out like bells. She ran from the porch, her curly brown hair flying as her small feet hurried toward him, her cheeks pink from the autumn breeze, her smile full of innocence and trust. Ethan crouched down, brushing his hand gently through her hair. "Good morning, little one. The faucet in the kitchen is broken again," Lily said seriously. "Mummy said, only you can fix it." She leaned closer, as though sharing a secret. Ethan chuckled. "Good thing I'm handy." He glanced up to see Claire stepping onto the porch. She wore a cream-colored sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back neatly though a few strands framed her face. There was flour on her apron from morning baking. Her smile was gentle, though her eyes carried a softness that made Ethan's chest tighten. "Good morning, Ethan," Claire said quietly. "The roads were clear today," Ethan replied, setting down his toolbox. "I thought I'd fix it before breakfast." Inside, the wooden house smelled of butter and cinnamon, filling the space with warmth that felt like home. Ethan bent to repair the leaky faucet as Lily hovered beside him, asking curious questions. "Uncle Ethan, do you ever feel sad?" she asked suddenly. He paused, surprised. "What do you mean, Lily? About Daddy?" she whispered. "I miss him so much." Ethan's heart clenched. He set down the wrench and knelt to her level. "I miss him too," he said softly. "But I believe he's watching from above, and he's proud of how strong you are." Her eyes lit up, tears giving way to a hopeful smile. "Really? Really?" Ethan said, tapping her nose gently. In that moment, he realized he wasn't just keeping a promise anymore. He loved this little girl, as if she were his own. Saturday mornings had become their quiet tradition. Ethan fixed things, shared breakfast, laughed with Lily, and spent time in Claire's kitchen. No one ever said it aloud, but it was clear they all looked forward to those mornings. They sat together at the old wooden table, the same one Daniel's family had gathered around for years. Claire poured milk while Lily colored beside her. Ethan sat across, trying not to stare as the sunlight glowed in Claire's hair. "Uncle Ethan," Lily asked suddenly, "why don't you live with us?" The room fell silent. Claire froze with the milk bottle in her hand. Ethan's throat tightened. He let out a soft laugh, scratching his head. "I have my own place, sweetheart, but you're always here," Lily said honestly. "You fix things for Mummy, eat with us, play with me. You're like Daddy." Claire lowered her gaze, her lips pressed together. She didn't scold her daughter. Children spoke the truth they saw, but her heart trembled at those innocent words. Ethan leaned forward, his voice gentle. "I'll always be here when you need me. Even if I don't live here, you'll never be alone." Lily smiled, satisfied with his answer, and returned to her coloring. But the air between Ethan and Claire grew heavier. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, hers filled with gratitude and unspoken feelings, his with emotions he could no longer deny. And though no words followed, both of them knew something deeper was quietly growing. Something neither dared to name. Saturday mornings soon became a quiet ritual in Willow Creek. Ethan would arrive with his toolbox, fix whatever needed fixing, share breakfast, and spend hours with Claire and Lily. For Lily, it felt as natural as breathing. For Ethan, it was both comfort and torment. That morning, the kitchen was warm with the scent of pancakes and cinnamon. Lily sat at the table, crayons scattered across her coloring book, while Claire poured milk into glasses. Ethan sat across from them, quietly eating, as he tried not to notice the way the sunlight fell through the window onto Claire's hair. She looked so much like the woman he had admired silently for years. "Uncle Ethan," Lily said, without lifting her head. Her voice, innocent but steady. "Why don't you stay with us forever?" Ethan froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Claire's hand trembled slightly as she set down the milk. Lily continued, "You fix things for Mummy. You play with me. You eat with us. You're just like Daddy." Ethan forced a smile. "I'll always be here for you, Lily, even if I don't live here." His words came out softly, but they carried the weight of a promise. Lily nodded with a satisfied grin and went back to coloring. Yet the silence that followed lingered between Ethan and Claire like a shadow neither dared to acknowledge. After breakfast, Lily dragged Ethan into the backyard to show him her secret hideout, a little fort made of pillows and cardboard boxes. Under the big maple tree, she named him the doorman of her castle, her laughter ringing through the crisp autumn air. Ethan played along, holding back the ache that came with the sight of Claire watching from the kitchen window. Her smile was soft, her eyes tender, and in that fleeting glance, Ethan felt something he had never allowed himself to admit. She was no longer just his best friend's wife. She was the woman he loved, silently, deeply, and without hope of confession. That evening, back in his small apartment, Ethan sat on the worn sofa with a cup of tea he never drank. Memories of the past drifted into his mind, long summer nights, camping with Daniel and Claire, bike rides through the forest, drunken karaoke nights in their college town. He had liked Claire even then, quietly, the way sunlight slips through curtains without fanfare. But Daniel had loved her too, and when the two of them came together, Ethan had smiled and stepped aside, choosing friendship over his own heart. He still remembered the night Daniel had admitted it over drinks. "You never said it, Ethan, but I know. Thank you for choosing me." There had been no pity in Daniel's eyes, only understanding between two men bound by loyalty. And now Daniel was gone, his absence leaving Ethan with a promise that felt heavier every day. Later that night, Ethan sat at a small bar in town, across from Peter Collins, a stocky co-worker with a bald head and a sharp wit that always cut through Ethan's silence. "Still black coffee?" Peter chuckled as Ethan ordered. "You drink enough caffeine to keep this whole town awake." Ethan gave a small smile, but didn't answer right away. "You were at Claire's again, weren't you?" Peter asked, leaning back in his chair. "Every Saturday, same routine, then you come here to drown in coffee because you can't drown in your feelings." Ethan stared into his cup. "It's not fear, Peter, it's respect. Claire deserves freedom, not a man bound to her because of a promise to someone who's gone." Peter raised an eyebrow. "You make it sound like love is selfish." "Sometimes it is, Ethan, but it doesn't make it wrong." Ethan didn't reply. He only looked out the window where the first leaves of autumn swirled in the wind. Deep inside, he knew Peter was right, but respect for the dead still weighed heavier than the longing in his heart. Sunday morning sunlight spilled gently across Willow Creek as Claire pushed her cart through the small-town supermarket. The aisles were quiet, the sound of wheels rolling on tile mixing with faint music from the ceiling speakers. She paused at the cereal shelf, but whispers nearby made her body stiffen. "He's at her house all the time again." One voice murmured, "I heard they didn't even wait long after Daniel passed." Another added, "Poor Lily, she doesn't even know what's going on." Claire's fingers tightened on the box in her hands. She forced a deep breath, pretending not to hear, but the words pierced straight through her chest. By the time she returned home, the smile she gave Lily felt fragile, the ache behind it heavier than she wanted to admit. That afternoon, Ethan arrived with his tool bag, ready to fix the creaking door hinge. The moment he stepped inside, He noticed the heaviness in Claire's eyes. He set his bag on the table and asked quietly, "Are you all right?" Claire hesitated, then shook her head. "Not really. I heard people talking in the supermarket today." Her voice was low, her gaze slipping toward the window. "About me?" Ethan asked. "About us," Claire whispered, biting her lip as if the words themselves were dangerous. They think there's more." Ethan stepped closer, his tone steady. "They don't know anything. Only we do." Claire managed a small smile, though it trembled. "Sometimes, I wonder, if Daniel was still here, none of this would have happened. And I hate myself for even thinking that." Ethan stayed silent. His chest tightened, not with judgment but with understanding. He couldn't tell her that he carried the same conflict every day. That night, heavy rain swept across Willow Creek. Thunder rumbled, the lights flickered, and soon the entire house was wrapped in darkness. Lily cried out from the living room, clutching her teddy bear, "Mummy." Claire rushed to hold her, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart, it's just the storm." Ethan pulled out his phone, its flashlight cutting through the dark. "How about we build a fort, bigger than last time?" His calm tone made Lily's tears fade into wide-eyed wonder. Within minutes, they piled up pillows and blankets into a fortress in the middle of the living room. Lily's giggles echoed, louder than the storm outside. Claire sat beside her daughter, her hair loose, her face lit faintly by the glow of the screen. For the first time that day, she smiled without hesitation. Later, when Lily drifted into sleep inside the fortress, Ethan and Claire sat side by side in silence. The rain softened, leaving only the sound of the child's breathing between them. Claire whispered, "Thank you." Ethan turned his gaze toward her. "I promised Daniel, but, if I'm honest, I'm doing this for myself too." Her eyes lifted to his in the dim light, and for a long moment, nothing more was said. The truth hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. And the silence carried a weight that words could no longer hide. Late autumn settled over Willow Creek, the maple trees lining the streets now bare, their branches reaching into the gray sky. A silver pickup truck rolled slowly through the familiar roads and stopped at the gate of Claire's house. Behind the wheel was Jonathan Morgan, Daniel's older brother. He hadn't set foot in town for nearly 7 years, ever since moving to the city for work, but now he was back, his mother Eleanor's heart attack bringing him home. Deep inside, however, another reason pulled at him: whispers that his brother's best friend was spending too much time with Daniel's widow. Claire was sweeping leaves from the porch when she heard the engine. Looking up, her breath caught. "Jonathan," she said softly, startled. He stepped out, his frame taller and broader than she remembered, his face hard but his eyes carrying something unspoken. "It's been a while," he replied. "I didn't know you were coming," Claire said, setting the broom aside. "How's your mother?" "She'll be fine. Doctor says rest will help," Jonathan answered, then glanced through the window where Lily sat on the floor working on a puzzle. His voice tightened. "I've also heard things about you and Ethan." Claire's heart sank. "Rumors," she said carefully. "That's all they are." Jonathan's jaw clenched. "Rumors don't spread without reason, Claire." Before she could respond, Lily's voice rang from inside the house. "Uncle Ethan is here." She darted to the door, her face lighting up as Ethan walked in with his tool bag in hand. "Jonathan." Ethan's voice carried surprise. He paused at the gate, shifting the weight of his bag. "Ethan," Jonathan said flatly. "Long time. Visiting your mother?" Ethan asked, his tone steady but guarded. "And to see what you're doing?" "To my brother's family," Jonathan replied, his words sharp and direct. The air grew heavy. Lily glanced between the adults, confusion filling her eyes. "Is Jonathan angry at Uncle Ethan?" Claire knelt beside her daughter, her voice calm though her chest ached. "No, sweetheart. The adults are just talking." But inside, she felt the storm building. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan stepped outside to the porch for air. The night was quiet, except for the rustle of dry leaves. He sat on the steps, lost in thought, when footsteps echoed behind him. Jonathan stood there, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. "Do you love Claire?" Jonathan asked bluntly, his voice low but cutting. Ethan froze. Silence stretched between them. "That's my brother's wife," Jonathan continued. His fists tightened. "The man you called your best friend. Do you think Daniel would want this?" Ethan's eyes lowered, his voice steady but strained. "I don't know what Daniel would want, Jonathan DeMal. All I know is I promised to protect them, and I'm keeping that promise." "Protect?" Jonathan let out a bitter laugh. "You call this protection? Letting the whole town gossip about her?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "You're not angry at me. You're angry because Daniel isn't here to protect them himself." For a moment, Jonathan's expression broke, pain flickering in his eyes before hardening again. "Keep your distance, Ethan. If you care about them, you'll stay away." He turned and walked back inside, leaving Ethan alone on the porch, staring at the sky where he and Daniel once lay, watching stars. That night, it felt as though he had lost his friend all over again. The next morning, the knock on Claire's door was sharp and urgent. When she opened it, she found Eleanor Morgan standing there in a heavy wool coat, her face pale but her eyes as sharp as ever. Though in her 60s, Daniel's mother still carried the presence of a woman who commanded respect. "We need to talk," Eleanor said, without greeting. Claire stepped aside, her chest tight, as she led her inside. They sat across from each other at the dining table. From the other room, Lily's laughter carried faintly, her small voice filling the silence like a fragile thread, ready to snap. Eleanor folded her hands on the table, her voice heavy. "It has been less than 2 years since Daniel passed, and already Ethan is here, so often the whole town has noticed. Do you think this is what my son would have wanted?" Claire lowered her gaze, her hands twisting in her lap. "He's helped me, Eleanor. He's helped Lily. I wouldn't have made it through without him." "Help?" Eleanor's voice cracked, her eyes glistening but hard. "Or are you letting him replace Daniel?" Claire lifted her head, her eyes red but fierce. "Do you think? I don't miss Daniel every single day. Do you think I enjoy the whispers? I only want Lily to grow up in a home filled with warmth, not silence and grief." Eleanor inhaled shakily, torn between grief and anger. "You're making excuses, Claire. You're making a mess of things." "No," Claire whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'm trying to survive." The words struck the air like a bell. For a moment, Eleanor looked away, wiping at her eyes quickly before standing to leave. But as she stepped outside, the weight of her disapproval still lingered in the house. That evening, Ethan arrived as usual, his tool bag in hand. He immediately noticed the change in Claire's expression, the sadness in her eyes. He set the bag down gently on the table. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice calm but filled with concern. Claire hesitated, then told him everything: the supermarket whispers, Jonathan's words, and now Eleanor's accusations. Her voice faltered as she admitted that Eleanor had even threatened to take Lily away. Ethan was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke softly. "Claire, if you want me to step back, I will. I don't want to make life harder for you." Claire's eyes widened, her voice breaking. "No, don't. You're the only reason I don't feel alone." The sincerity in her words left Ethan unable to respond. He simply placed his hand lightly on the table, close enough to feel the warmth of hers without touching. Between them lay an unspoken truth, whatever others believed. Neither of them wanted to let go. The following week, the whispers that haunted Claire and Ethan reached the schoolyard. On a cool autumn morning, Lily stood clutching her pink lunchbox as a few children gathered nearby, their voices low but sharp. "My mum said Uncle Ethan lives with your mum," one boy snickered. "No, they're getting married," another added. A taller child leaned closer, his tone teasing. "So, where's your real dad then? Is Uncle Ethan your dad?" Lily's throat tightened. She clutched her lunchbox harder and whispered, "No. My dad is Daniel, he's in heaven." "Then what's Ethan to you?" A little girl pressed, her voice playful but cruel in its innocence. Tears welled in Lily's eyes. She didn't answer. She turned and ran into the classroom, her small shoulders shaking. Later that afternoon, Claire was called to the school. In the teacher's room, she found Lily sitting in the corner, holding the teddy bear she always carried in her backpack. Her eyes were red from crying. "What happened?" Claire whispered, kneeling to hug her daughter. "They asked if Ethan is my dad," Lily murmured into her mother's sweater. Her small body trembled, her voice thin and fragile. Claire's chest tightened as she held her daughter closer. Mrs. Taylor, Lily's homeroom teacher, approached gently. A woman in her 40s with kind but steady eyes, she spoke softly. "Children repeat what they hear at home. Gossip moves quickly in a town like this. Lily's caught in the middle of something she's too young to understand." Claire swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. I never wanted her to feel this way." "The best thing you can do now," Mrs. Taylor said warmly, "is to help her understand that none of this is her fault. And love, even when it comes later, is not wrong." The words struck Claire deeply. Part of her felt comforted, but part of her felt exposed, as though someone had peeled back layers she wasn't ready to face. That evening, Ethan stopped by with a small gift for Lilia, teddy bear, in a bright red sweater. Lily's eyes brightened when she saw him, and she hugged his leg tightly, though sadness still lingered in her face. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked softly. Glancing at Claire, Claire met his eyes and whispered, "We'll talk after she's asleep." He nodded without another word, then knelt to the floor to help Lily with her puzzle, his laughter slowly coaxing hers back. Claire stood at the kitchen doorway, her hands gripping the hem of her dress, her heart torn. She knew the time was coming when she and Ethan would have to admit what they had both been holding inside. The annual fall festival arrived in Willow Creek, filling the town square with popcorn stands, caramel apples, bright lanterns, and the sound of country music echoing beneath the autumn sky. Children laughed, running between games. While families crowded the booths, Claire hesitated that morning, her heart heavy with doubt. She knew the festival would be full of whispers and stares, but Lily's excitement was impossible to deny. And when Ethan quietly asked, "Do you want me to come with you?" Claire paused only for a moment before nodding. They arrived together, Lily running ahead with a balloon tied to her wrist, her curls bouncing in the golden light. Ethan's eyes followed her closely, worry and affection blending into every step. Claire walked beside him, clutching her bag a little tighter, aware of the glances that followed them through the crowd. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked gently, his voice low. "I'm fine," Claire whispered, though her voice trembled. "I'm just not used to people looking at me like this." "If you're uncomfortable, we can leave early," he offered. She shook her head. Her eyes softened as she watched Lily laugh at a game booth. "No. She deserves this day." Lily tossed rings at bottles, her laughter spilling over the music until she finally won a giant blue stuffed bear. She held it up proudly. "Look, Uncle Ethan." Ethan laughed, ruffling her hair. "That's my girl." Claire smiled too, her heart lighter for the first time in days. For that moment, they truly looked like a family, and it was impossible not to feel it. As dusk settled, lanterns glowed yellow across the square. Music slowed to a softer melody, and Lily tugged her mother's hand, pointing toward the Ferris wheel. "Please, Mummy, can we go?" Claire glanced at Ethan, and when he smiled, she nodded. Together, they climbed into the small cabin, Lily pressed between them, clutching her new stuffed bear. As the wheel rose higher, the lights of Willow Creek shimmered below. Rooftops and golden leaves, turning into a sea of color. "So beautiful," Lily whispered, her cheek against the glass. Claire stole a glance at Ethan. His face was calm, but in his eyes, she saw the weight of unspoken feelings. In that moment, she realized she didn't want to hide anymore. When the ride ended, the crowd thickened as fireworks began. Suddenly, Claire turned, and Lily was gone. Her heart dropped. "Lily," she cried, her voice sharp with panic. Ethan grabbed her hand firmly. "Stay here, I'll find her." "No," Claire pleaded, tears brimming. "I can't just stand here. Trust me," he said, squeezing her hand, his eyes steady, even in the chaos. Then he ran into the crowd, his voice calling out, "Lily." Over the noise of fireworks exploding in the sky, he searched desperately, weaving through the maze of people until he spotted a pink balloon tangled in a tree branch near the lake at the edge of the festival. Beneath it, Lily sat clutching her, teddy bear tears streaking her face. "Uncle Ethan," she cried as he rushed to her. "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you," Ethan whispered, pulling her into his arms, relief shaking his voice when he carried her back through the crowd. Claire rushed forward, gathering her daughter into her embrace. I thought I lost you," she sobbed. "You won't," Ethan said firmly. "I would never let that happen." Their eyes met in the glow of the fireworks above. For the first time, Claire didn't look away. 3 days after the festival, Ethan returned to his routine at the small machine shop outside Willow Creek. The smell of oil and metal filled the air as he wiped his hands clean when the door opened. A bright, familiar voice called out, "Ethan Walker." He froze for a moment before looking up. Standing in the doorway was Julia Sanders, an old colleague from his city days. Her blonde hair caught the light, her smile confident, the kind that belonged to someone who had lived too long in the rush of busy streets. "Julia," Ethan said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I transferred down for a few months," she replied, setting her bag on the counter. "I never thought I'd see you in a quiet place like this." She laughed softly, her eyes glimmering with curiosity. That afternoon, while Ethan drove Lily home from school, Julia happened to pass through the neighborhood. She pulled her car over, rolled down the window, and waved cheerfully. "Ethan, are you here too?" Her voice was light, her tone familiar. From the porch, Claire looked up, the broom slipping slightly in her hand, as she saw the woman leaning out of the car, with a smile meant only for Ethan. "Claire," Ethan said quickly, his voice carrying a hint of unease. "This is Julia, an old friend from the city." "Julia, this is Claire." Julia smiled warmly, extending her hand. "So, you're Claire. I've heard plenty about Ethan back at the company. Looks like you're the famous family he can't stop talking about." Claire forced a polite smile, but her fingers tightened on the broom. "Really?" Her tone was soft, but her heart twisted unexpectedly. "Uncle Ethan, who is this?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Just an old friend," Ethan said quickly, patting her head. Julia laughed lightly. "She's adorable. She reminds me of my little sister when she was small." That night, as Claire washed dishes alone in the kitchen, her mind replayed Julia's smile, the easy way she had called Ethan's name, and the warmth in his response. Claire told herself she had no right to feel this way, no right to be unsettled. Yet her heart weighed heavy all the same. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his hands in his pockets. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Claire forced a smile. "I'm fine." He frowned slightly, sensing the distance, but said nothing. In the silence, the ticking of the clock mixed with the sound of water running from the tap. They stood, only a few steps apart, but it felt as though miles stretched between them. The next day, Julia appeared again, this time at the school where she volunteered for a fundraiser. Claire was there as well. Julia waved brightly. "Claire, what luck. Running into you again." Claire returned a polite nod. "Yes, what a coincidence." Julia leaned closer, her tone light but pointed. "Ethan talks about you and Lily a lot. It's obvious he cares about you both deeply." Claire's chest tightened. "He's kind, everyone knows that." Julia smiled playfully, kind and rare. "Honestly, if someone hadn't already taken him, I might have." The words cut through Claire like a blade. She stayed silent, but the smile on her lips faded. Only the pounding of her heart remained. That evening, when Ethan dropped off a small toy for Lily, Claire's eyes carried a storm. He couldn't name what's wrong. He asked gently. "Nothing," she replied quickly, but her tone was sharp. "You seem busy with your old friend." Ethan froze, surprised at the edge in her voice. He opened his mouth to explain, then stopped. The look in her eyes told him everything: hurt, fear, and something far deeper than jealousy. And in that silence, Lily's laughter echoed from the living room. Oblivious to the storm brewing quietly between the adults, The sky over Willow Creek turned grey, heavy with clouds. That seemed to mirror the tension inside Claire's cottage. Jonathan stood by the window, arms crossed, his jaw set. Eleanor sat in the armchair, her eyes tired but stern. Claire clutched her sweater at the table, and Ethan sat silently on the porch steps. Trying to keep his composure, the town was buzzing. With rumors after the festival, Julia's arrival only added fuel to the fire. Whispers spread faster than autumn wind, and finally, Jonathan decided to confront the truth head-on. "I'll be blunt," he said, his voice sharp as steel. "I don't believe you're here because of a promise to my brother anymore, Ethan." Ethan's fists clenched. His voice came out steady but low. "What do you mean by that?" "I think you're using Claire," Jonathan snapped. "Using Daniel's death as an excuse to slide into his place." "Jonathan, don't," Claire pleaded, stepping forward. "Stay out of it, Claire." Jonathan's voice cracked with emotion. "My brother's been gone less than 2 years, and you let his best friend into your life. Do you even care what Daniel would think?" Eleanor rose to her feet, her voice trembling but firm. "Jonathan is right. This isn't right, Claire. I lost a son, and now I see his place being filled as if he were nothing more than a memory." Tears welled in Claire's eyes. "You think this is easy for me? You think I don't wake up missing Daniel every single day? But I was left to raise Lily alone, to carry the silence and the grief. Ethan was there when no one else was. He gave us strength. That's the worst excuse I've ever heard," Jonathan growled. "Daniel would be heartbroken if he knew." At last Ethan spoke, his voice steady, his chest tight. "Daniel knew. Before he died, he asked me to take care of them. He trusted me." Jonathan's laugh was bitter. "Trusted you to replace him?" "No," Ethan said firmly, his voice breaking with restrained pain. "No one can replace Daniel. I don't want to. I just don't want Claire and Lily to live in darkness forever." Eleanor's face hardened, though her hands shook. "If this continues, I'll go to the court and ask for custody of Lily. At least then, she'll be raised with her father's memory intact." Claire gasped, her voice shattering. You can't do that." "I can," Eleanor said, her tears betraying her resolve. "And I will, if that's the only way to protect my granddaughter." The room spun around Claire. The thought of losing her daughter, of losing the fragile piece of happiness she'd managed to hold onto, broke her from the inside. Ethan stepped forward, his voice softer but unyielding. "Eleanor, I understand your pain, but taking Lily from her mother would destroy her. Daniel wouldn't want that. He'd want her to grow up surrounded by love, not bitterness." "Do you really think you know what's best for my granddaughter better than I do?" Eleanor asked, her voice cracking. "No," Ethan whispered, shaking his head. "I just know Daniel wouldn't want Lily to grow up hating the world." For a long moment, no one spoke. Jonathan turned away, his jaw clenched tight. Eleanor lowered herself shakily back into her chair, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. And then, from the next room, Lily's small voice broke through, trembling but clear. "Are you fighting?" She stood clutching her teddy bear, her wide eyes full of fear. The room fell silent. Guilt pressed down on everyone like a heavy stone. The innocence in her question cut deeper than any argument could. Days passed in silence, heavy and unkind. Ethan avoided Claire's calls, weighed down by guilt and doubt. He spent long hours alone at the lake where he and Daniel once fished, staring at the rippling water under the moonlight. "Daniel," he whispered into the wind, his voice breaking, "am I protecting them, or betraying you?" But the lake gave no answer, only the echo of his own loneliness. At home, Claire searched for strength she didn't feel. One afternoon, she climbed into the attic, sorting through boxes of Daniel's old things. Beneath photographs and yellowed papers, she found a small wooden box. Inside lay a sealed envelope marked in Daniel's handwriting, "To Claire and Ethan." Her hands shook as she opened it. The words were simple, but they struck with the weight of love. "Claire, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I know Ethan will keep his promise, because he always has. And I also know he loves you. I never blamed him for that. If you ever smile at him, don't feel guilty. Love each other the way I loved you, with everything. Ethan, you've been my brother for years. If you make Claire happy, then I'll be happy too, wherever I am. Tears blurred Claire's vision, but for the first time since Daniel's death, her heart felt light. She whispered, "Thank you," clutching the letter against her chest. That night, she drove to the lake. Ethan sat alone by the water, the moon casting silver over his shoulders. Claire approached quietly and handed him the letter. "You need to read this." He opened it, and as his eyes scanned Daniel's words, his hands trembled, his breath caught, and his voice cracked. "Daniel," he closed his eyes, the guilt that had haunted him dissolving into tears of relief. Claire's voice was steady, though her own tears fell freely. "He wants us to live. Not to forget him, but to carry him with us and still choose happiness." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then nodded, his voice low but sure. "I want to try with you and Lily." Her smile broke through the tears, brighter than it had been in years. "So do I." The next morning Claire stood at Eleanor's door, holding Daniel's letter. Her heart pounded as she offered it to her. Eleanor unfolded the paper with trembling hands. When she read her son's words, her stern face broke into sobs. He knew everything," she whispered. Jonathan stood beside her, his shoulders tense, then slowly softening as the truth sank in. "He didn't blame anyone," Jonathan said quietly. "He only wanted us all to be happy." Claire reached for Eleanor's hand. "You'll never lose Daniel. He's still here, in Lily, in all of us." For the first time since his death, the family sat together without anger. Ethan stood quietly nearby, and Jonathan placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "If you make them happy, Ethan, you'll have our support." Weeks later, the town gathered in the square for Daniel's memorial. White daisies decorated the stage. His favorite flower, and his face appeared on the screen above, smiling as if he was still among them. Claire sat with Lily on one side and Ethan on the other, while Eleanor and Jonathan stood close by. When Jonathan stepped onto the stage, his voice carried over the crowd. "I am Daniel's brother. For a long time I was angry, believing someone was trying to replace him. But my brother's own words taught me the truth. What he wanted was for us to live and to love, without fear. If you truly knew him, you'd know that's what he would want for all of us." The square fell silent, then slowly filled with applause. The weight of gossip began to fade, replaced by something gentler, acceptance. Later that week, Ethan and Lily built a treehouse in the big maple tree behind Claire's home. Claire watched from the porch, coffee warming her hands, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Lily climbed the rope ladder, her laughter ringing like music. "It's the most beautiful house in the world," she shouted from the branches. Ethan looked down at Claire, his smile warm and steady. "I promised her, and I intend to keep that promise." By the time the sun set, the treehouse stood tall, filled with photographs of Daniel, Claire, Lily, and now Ethan. Not to replace, but to connect the past with the present. The three of them sat on the porch the next morning, breakfast on the table, the golden light of autumn filtering through the trees. There were no more whispers in town, no more judgmental laughter, peace, and the quiet beginning of something new. Lily looked up at Ethan, her mouth full of pancakes. "Uncle Ethan, what are you to me now?" Claire smiled softly, waiting for his answer. Ethan looked at the little girl who had become his heart. "What do you think I am?" She tilted her head, thought for a moment, then grinned. "Your family." For the first time in years, Ethan's chest felt whole. Claire placed her hand near his, and this time she didn't pull away. Above them, the treehouse swayed gently in the wind, not just a house, but a symbol of a new beginning built on love, memory, and the courage to live again.